The mind has a strange way of testing your strength, not when you're standing tall, but when you've been brought to your knees and no one is watching. It's in those quiet, suffocating hours when the noise of the world fades and all that remains is your breath and the whisper of doubt. That's where your true power hides. Not in the moments of applause, but in the silence where you decide to rise again. Growth never announces itself. It demands endurance through the unseen. You are built from everything that tried to break you, molded by moments that nearly destroyed your hope. And yet, here you are, breathing, existing, moving forward, even when part of you still trembles. That trembling part is not your weakness. It's the most honest proof that you're human enough to feel, but strong enough to keep going despite it. Every scar has a story, but not every story needs to be told aloud. Some are written deep within the folds of your heart, waiting to be understood only by you. Healing doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed when your soul feels heavy, or forgiving yourself for the days you couldn't. The process isn't graceful, and it isn't meant to be. It's messy, it's raw, but it's real, and the realness is where transformation begins. There's a certain beauty in surviving the chaos, in realizing that what was meant to ruin you actually refined you. The fire you walked through wasn't there to burn you, it was there to reveal the parts of you that could never be consumed. When you start to see pain as a teacher, everything changes. It stops being the villain in your story, it becomes the architect of your strength. You begin to understand that not every loss is a punishment, some are invitations to rebuild. Life doesn't take things from you to leave you empty, it clears the space for something more aligned with your purpose. But you only see that when you stop resisting the lesson and start embracing the message. You start realizing that maybe the universe isn't cruel, maybe it's just honest. It gives you what you need, not what you want. And in that truth lies the most profound form of love, the kind that pushes you towards your highest self, even when it hurts. And then one day, after all the storms, you catch your reflection and notice something different. The eyes that once held fear now hold fire. The hands that once shook now build. The heart that once shattered now beats with purpose. That's not coincidence. That's evolution. That's what happens when you refuse to let the world harden you. You become gentler, wiser, more aware. You start to see that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about being unshakable in your faith that no matter what comes, you'll find your way through it. You stop waiting for life to get easier and start becoming stronger than the challenges themselves. Because deep down, you finally understand the strength you were searching for was never out there. It was always waiting quietly within you. The moment you begin to trust the quiet within you more than the noise around you, life starts to shift. You stop chasing validation and start valuing peace. You realize that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, reminding you that survival itself is a victory. The world often celebrates loud success, but true transformation happens in solitude, in those sacred hours where you choose understanding over reaction, patience over pride, self-worth over approval. That's where you rebuild yourself, not for applause, but for alignment. You start to see that the people who once misunderstood your silence were never meant to hear your truth. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. It was the soul rearranging itself to match the frequency of your next chapter. When you learn to let go of what's no longer meant for you, something extraordinary happens. The weight you were carrying turns into wings. You stop trying to rewrite the past and start rewriting your belief in what's possible. Forgiveness becomes less about others and more about freeing your own spirit from the chains of resentment. You begin to understand that peace isn't found by fixing what's broken outside of you, but by healing what's fractured inside. Life will keep testing that lesson until you learn it deeply. It will send you the same pain in different forms until you finally respond differently. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. That's growth. It's not about winning every battle. It's about not losing yourself in the process. Every person you meet, every heartbreak, every disappointment is a mirror reflecting something you needed to see. Sometimes that reflection is painful, but it's never pointless. You start realizing that nothing truly leaves until it's taught you what it came to teach. The universe has a way of breaking you open only to fill you with more light. You may not notice it at first, the way your laughter sounds different, the way your presence feels calmer, the way your boundaries become clearer, but over time, it becomes undeniable. You're not who you were before the pain. You're someone stronger, softer, deeper. The same heart that once cracked under pressure now holds more compassion than it ever did before. The same mind that once spiraled in fear now finds strength in surrender. And that's the paradox. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to what's meant to be. It's trusting that even the detours are divine. It's understanding that delay isn't denial, and rejection isn't failure. It's redirection towards something more aligned with your truth. When you stop forcing and start flowing, you find that what's meant for you has been trying to reach you all along. You were just too guarded to receive it. The walls you built to protect yourself became prisons that held your joy hostage. But when those walls finally fall, you don't lose. You become free. Free to love without fear, to hope without hesitation, to dream without apology. Because you've finally learned the greatest truth of all, that your worth was never something to prove, it was something to remember. There comes a time when you stop running from your shadows and start listening to them. The parts of you that ache, the memories that sting, the doubts that whisper, they aren't your enemies. They're your teachers, waiting patiently for you to stop pretending you don't hear them. Healing begins when you stop trying to silence your pain and start understanding its language. Every fear, every wound, every scar holds a message. Don't abandon yourself. The world may have taught you to hide your softness, to toughen up, to bury what hurts, but true courage is found in the heart that dares to feel anyway. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's truth unclothed, raw and radiant. When you face what you've been avoiding, you don't crumble, you awaken. You realize that the very emotions you feared were the bridges back to your authentic self. The strength you've been searching for has always lived in your willingness to stay open in a world that constantly asks you to shut down. It's easy to armor your heart, to numb yourself, to stop believing, but that's not living, that's surviving. And you weren't born just to survive. You were born to expand, to breathe deeply, to stand in your truth, even when it shakes. The most powerful transformation happens when you no longer seek safety in control, but peace in surrender. Life stops being a battle to win and becomes a dance to trust. You stop chasing certainty and start embracing mystery. That's when everything begins to align, not because it suddenly became easy, but because you did. You became grounded in the chaos, calm in the storm, centered in your becoming. You start to see that every ending is secretly a beginning, every loss a quiet form of liberation. The moments that once shattered you now shape the architecture of your wisdom. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to awaken within me?" That shift changes everything. It moves you from victimhood to empowerment, from blame to understanding, from fear to faith. Because when you trust that even the pain has purpose, you stop resisting your journey. You realize that your brokenness was never the end of your story. It was the birth of your depth. The cracks that once embarrassed you now let the light through. The things that once made you different now make you unforgettable. And as you walk forward, something quiet but profound begins to unfold. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a confidence that doesn't need validation, a love for yourself that feels unshakable. You begin to realize that you were never meant to find yourself in the approval of others, but in the stillness of your own becoming. The world may never fully understand your journey, but it doesn't have to. What matters is that you do. You've learned to breathe through the uncertainty, to find beauty in the brokenness, to see strength where you once saw loss. And in that understanding lies the ultimate transformation. You've become the person you once needed, and that is the quiet, unspoken victory that changes everything. There's a sacred shift that happens the moment you stop waiting for life to be perfect before you start living it. You realize that peace isn't something you stumble upon when everything aligns. It's something you create in the middle of the mess. It's the decision to keep showing up, even when the pieces aren't fitting, even when the future feels uncertain. That choice is everything. It's what separates the ones who merely exist from those who truly live. Because the truth is, life will never pause until you feel ready. It will demand that you move while your heart still aches, that you trust while you're still trembling, that you love even after loss. And in doing so, it will quietly reveal the beauty of resilience, that sacred fire within you that refuses to go out, no matter how many storms try to drown it. You begin to understand that healing is not the absence of pain, but the presence of grace. It's not about erasing the past, but learning to hold it gently, without letting it define you. Some days you'll feel strong, others you'll feel fragile. But both are signs of growth. The cracks in your armor are not failures, they are openings for the light to enter. You no longer need to pretend to be untouched by life. You only need to be honest about how it has shaped you. Strength is not pretending you're fine. It's allowing yourself to break and still believing you'll rise again. It's the quiet knowing that even in your darkest hour, something within you is still reaching for the light. When you start to honor your pain instead of resisting it, it transforms. It stops being a wound and becomes wisdom. You realize that every disappointment carved space for deeper clarity. Every heartbreak taught you how to love more authentically. Every failure whispered lessons that success never could. The things you once begged the universe to change now stand as proof of how far you've come. You stop chasing perfection and start cherishing authenticity. The masks fall away, and what remains is raw, real, unfiltered you. And that version is powerful beyond measure. Because the moment you embrace your truth, the world around you begins to shift. You attract peace instead of chaos, purpose instead of confusion, depth instead of distraction. The greatest freedom comes when you stop apologizing for your light, when you no longer dim yourself to fit into spaces that can't hold your brilliance. You were not made to blend in. You were born to stand out, to disrupt patterns, to awaken hearts simply by being who you are. The ones who truly see you will never ask you to shrink. They'll meet you where your soul shines the brightest. And for the rest, you let them go, not out of bitterness, but because you finally understood that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's sacred. You begin walking through life with softer eyes but a stronger heart. You forgive more easily, speak more gently, love more freely, not because life got easier, but because you grew wiser. And that wisdom becomes your quiet revolution. The proof that no matter how much you've endured, you can still choose light, still choose love, still choose to rise. There comes a moment when you realize that the peace you seek is not something to be found in the world, but something to be built within yourself. It's not hiding in the future you dream of, or the past you keep revisiting. It's waiting quietly in the present, but beneath the noise of everything you think you need to be. You start to see that chasing happiness through external validation only leaves you emptier. Every compliment fades, every achievement loses its shine, and every high eventually dips into silence. But the kind of peace that endures, the one that carries you through storms, it's born the day you decide to stop negotiating your worth with the world. The day you finally say, "I am enough," and mean it, even when the mirror reflects your doubts back at you. True freedom begins when you stop defining yourself by what's missing and start recognizing what's already within. The more you fight to become someone else, the further you drift from who you were meant to be. The world conditions you to keep striving, for approval, for perfection, for more. But your soul is quietly asking you to pause, to breathe, to return. You begin to understand that growth isn't about constant elevation. Sometimes it's about grounding yourself so deeply in authenticity that no external storm can uproot your calm. You stop performing your life and start living it. You stop rushing toward an imagined version of happiness and start finding beauty in simplicity, in moments of stillness, in small acts of kindness, in knowing that even your imperfections are divine threads in your becoming. The journey of becoming whole is rarely comfortable. It demands that you face the parts of yourself you've tried to hide, the guilt, the regret, the longing, the fear. But when you confront them with compassion instead of judgment, they lose their power to define you. You realize that self-love isn't a feeling, it's a commitment. It's choosing to show up for yourself again and again, even when it's hard. It's learning to be gentle with your own humanity, to forgive yourself for what you didn't know then, to honor the fact that you're still learning now. Every time you choose kindness over criticism, you reclaim a part of yourself that the world once made you doubt. That reclamation is the quiet revolution that changes everything. And slowly, the noise fades. The comparisons lose their hold. You stop measuring your worth against timelines and expectations. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to start living, because you finally see that life has been happening all along. In the breaths you overlooked, in the lessons disguised as loss, in the resilience you didn't even know you had. You begin to move differently, not out of fear, but from faith. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've learned to trust your own pace. You've made peace with the idea that becoming is not a destination, it's a lifelong unfolding. And in that understanding, you find the rarest kind of strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything because it already knows its worth. The real turning point comes when you finally stop asking life to be easier and start asking yourself to be braver. That's when something inside you shifts. The fear that once paralyzed you begins to lose its grip, and you start to see that courage was never about being unafraid. It was about walking forward despite the shaking hands, the racing heart, the uncertainty that whispers you're not ready. You begin to understand that waiting for confidence before taking the leap is just another form of delay. Confidence doesn't appear in the stillness of planning, it's born in the motion of doing. Every step, no matter how uncertain, builds a bridge toward the version of you that exists beyond fear. And in that process, you begin to meet the person you were always meant to become, not the one the world told you to be, but the one your soul has been quietly calling you to remember. When you stop running from discomfort, it stops chasing you. You learn to stand still in its presence, to breathe through it, to see it not as punishment but as a path. Growth has always been demanding. It asks for your patience, your humility, your willingness to release control. But what it gives in return is something far more valuable than comfort: clarity. You start recognizing that the moments that once made you question your strength were actually sculpting it. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every detour was refining your character in ways that comfort never could. You stop asking why it hurt so much and start realizing that pain was never there to destroy you. It was there to expand your capacity for compassion, understanding, and truth. The deeper you go within, the more you start to realize that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the ability to remain centered within it. You begin to see that your emotions are not weaknesses to suppress, but signals to understand. Fear, sadness, anger, they all have something to say if you're willing to listen without judgment. You stop fighting your emotions and start flowing with them, allowing each feeling to pass through you instead of defining you. That acceptance becomes your strength. Because when you no longer fear your own depth, no external storm can shake you. You become anchored in awareness, grounded in who you are, not in who the world expects you to be. And one day, almost without realizing it, you find yourself standing in the same place that once broke you, and it no longer hurts. The memories are still there, but they no longer control you. You've outgrown them, not because time healed you, but because you chose to heal yourself. You stop living in reaction to your pain and start creating from your peace. The person you've become no longer needs validation, approval, or permission to exist fully. You finally see that you are not defined by what happened to you, but by how you chose to rise from it. Every lesson, every scar, every tear became the fabric of your becoming. And in that truth, you find a quiet, unshakable freedom, the kind that no one can give you and no one can take away. The greatest liberation happens when you stop trying to be understood by everyone and start understanding yourself. The world will always have opinions, labels, and assumptions, but none of them can touch the truth that lives within you. You begin to realize that seeking validation is a slow erosion of the soul. The more you try to please others, the further you drift from your own essence. There is profound peace in choosing authenticity over approval, in knowing that not everyone will understand your path and still walking it with conviction. You stop needing to explain your evolution to those who only knew a former version of you. Growth often looks like distance, and distance often feels like loneliness. But that solitude is where your voice strengthens, your clarity sharpens, your spirit matures. It's not isolation, it's incubation, the sacred space where your next level is being born. You start to see that self-respect is the foundation of all healing. It's in the boundaries you set, the energy you protect, and the standards you refuse to lower. You learn that saying no isn't unkind, it's necessary. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace, for outgrowing relationships that no longer nourish you, for refusing to shrink so others can feel comfortable. You realize that every time you betray your truth to be accepted, you teach your soul that its voice doesn't matter, and that's a lesson you can no longer afford to repeat. You begin choosing yourself not out of arrogance, but alignment. The people meant for you will never demand your self-betrayal as proof of loyalty. They'll recognize your boundaries as the language of self-worth and meet you with the same respect you give yourself. Through this, your definition of strength transforms. It's no longer about enduring everything, it's about discerning what deserves your endurance. You stop glorifying struggle as identity and begin honoring peace as purpose. Strength becomes softer, not a shield but a steady knowing that you can handle life without losing your tenderness. You start forgiving yourself for the versions of you that didn't know better, for the mistakes made in survival, for the times you settled for less, because you didn't yet understand your value. That forgiveness becomes a rebirth, a quiet exhale that frees you from the weight of regret. You learn that you were never broken, you were becoming. Every fragment was a part of your formation, every ending a piece of your emergence. As this awareness deepens, you begin to walk lighter. The noise that once consumed you loses its power. You move with a calm that doesn't come from everything being perfect, but from knowing that you can face whatever comes without losing yourself again. You speak less, but when you do, it carries truth. You love slower, but deeper. You give without depletion, rest without guilt, and rise without rushing. The world may not change, but your relationship to it does. You stop trying to chase peace and realize you've become it. And in that stillness, you understand what it means to be truly alive, to exist not as a reflection of expectation, but as a living embodiment of authenticity, wisdom, and quiet, unwavering grace. There is a quiet revolution that begins the moment you stop running from yourself. The masks you once wore begin to feel heavy, and the false identities you built to survive start to crumble under the weight of truth. You no longer crave the illusion of being everything to everyone. You crave the honesty of being real with yourself. That's where transformation begins, not in perfection, but in radical self-acceptance. You start to see that authenticity is not about becoming something new, it's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. Beneath the expectations, the fear, the need to belong, there has always been a steady voice, the voice that whispers, "This is who I am." And when you finally listen, everything begins to align with an ease that no amount of pretending could ever bring. You realize that peace doesn't come from avoiding your truth, but from embracing it. The things you once labeled as flaws reveal themselves as parts of your humanity. The emotions you tried to suppress, the anger, the grief, the longing, are no longer threats but messengers. You begin to see that wholeness is not about silencing the chaos within, but about making peace with it. When you stop fighting your emotions, they stop fighting you. They become guides, leading you back to the parts of yourself you abandoned. The moment you stop judging what you feel, you begin to understand why you feel it. And in that understanding, healing takes root. You no longer see pain as proof of weakness, you see it as evidence of life, a sign that your heart still dares to open, still dares to care. There's something deeply sacred about reclaiming your own presence. You stop seeking refuge in distractions, in people, in things, and you learn to find safety within your own stillness. Solitude becomes less of a punishment and more of a sanctuary. It's in those quiet moments with yourself that the fragments begin to reassemble. You rediscover your worth, not through achievement but through awareness, through realizing that simply existing as you are is enough. You stop negotiating your value with the world because you've finally seen it with your own eyes. Every breath becomes a reminder that you are here for a reason, not to prove but to express, not to impress but to become. You no longer chase meaning, you live it. And in that stillness, a gentler kind of strength emerges, one that no longer needs to shout. You learn that being unshakable doesn't mean being untouched by life, it means being grounded enough to bend without breaking. It's the calm in your voice when others expect you to fall apart, the softness in your eyes even after all you've seen, the courage to love again when it would be easier to close your heart. That is real power, not domination.